All right. Hey, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Highly Melanated.
Highly melanated.
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 All this melanin just
Highly
dripping.
melanated.
Drip,
High
drip.
melanated.
Drip, 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 drip.
Came through dripping.
Hey,
You know, every time you say, I'm going to do it every time.
Oh, guys. Okay, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Highly Melanated, where we melanate your palate and we feed your soul. PJ. It is.
Set the tone.
PJ, it's hard to have these conversations with children, but it's important.
Ushi, make Juneteenth a federal holiday, just like the 4th of July.
Red, let's manifest our future, our world, our dreams, our goals. Red.
And we are joined on the call.
Hey, wait.
Oh,
Who's that?
oops.
Sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and log out of the chat.
Log off.
Chat out. Hello.
Did she log out?
I
there.
am Blair. Let's not let the demonstrations die just because outside is open.
All right, and we're back with another episode. Thank you. And also joined on the call today is Dr. Tasha Ellis.
Hello.
Welcome, Aquaba.
Thank you.
Bienvenue.
Hello.
And we're glad to have you here on this wonderful day to have this beautiful conversation. And as always, guys, you can follow us on all forms of social media. That is on Instagram, that is Highly Melanated Podcast. On Twitter, that is H_Melanated Pod. You can go to our website at www.com. And you can also email us at highlymelanatedpodcast.com.
Yes.
That's actually incorrect. highlymelanatedpodcast@gmail.com.
There you go.
Okay, good.
I got it.
God. Well, everyone, welcome once again to the Highly Melanated Manor, where we melanate your palate and we feed your soul. My name is Jeeves, and what I am here to do today is just start you guys off with a beverage and a toast. Typically, what we do is we go around and we say to everybody in the room, is there something that they are thankful for? Is it something that they want to shout out anybody? But because Dr. Tasha Ellis is our guest, we would like to actually focus and give our toast and a chance for her to speak on what she wants to drink. Tomorrow is Juneteenth. So what is your red soda drink? What would you like to start off, and who would you like to shout out?
That's a good question. Well, first and foremost, thank you all for having me. And I would like just to shout out to a multitude of people, the people that are standing in the front lines now, people who have been standing in the front lines in order to make it possible for us to be able to come together to have this conversation in this way. So I'm thankful for those who are brave enough and bold enough to stand up and stand in the gap for others. So I would like to just give a shout out to all of the people, melanated and non-melanated, that are out there standing in the gap and speaking our truth.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Do you have a beverage of choice to go along with that?
Something red, preferably.
Something red. Let's see. A red beverage of choice right now would probably be, it's a good question. I'll say Red Rock.
All right now.
Okay.
Absolutely, ma'am. We'll get you any of that, anything that you need.
Anything that I need, I'll take it.
Hey.
Thank you.
Well, all right. Well, following up our toast, we like to give our melanated senses, and everybody knows those are the things that we see, taste, hear, touch, and smell throughout the week that is full of melanation. So, Tasha, is there anything that has occurred in the last week or the last couple of weeks or so that you would like to kind of give like a spotlight on that fulfilled one of those senses for you?
Actually, yes. There have just been so many things happening that have been heavy on my heart and heavy for me mentally as well, because it's just hard to see some of the same things happening over and over and over again. I will say that you all reaching out to me was a highlight. I wrote a book. It's been out for over a year now, and it's called #Enough. And it is dealing with that difficult conversation for police brutality and racism for children. So to just be picked up and to have you all reach out to me has definitely been a highlight in the midst of all the things that are going on.
All right, that's awesome.
Wonderful.
We really appreciate you actually being here. I mean, it's amazing what you've done, what you're doing,
Sure.
and this is an important conversation. This is an important message that needs to be told across the board. And I'm sure that there are parents out there who experience the exact same thing. And you're helping giving a guide to
Absolutely.
what we should do.
Yeah, absolutely. It's wonderful. So with that, we're going to go ahead and jump into the meat and potatoes, the body of this. And what we're going to do is we're going to serve a nice down home Juneteenth meal. So just to educate people a little bit of background, the traditional Juneteenth meal is based with collard greens and sweet potatoes. So with that being said, I'm going to serve that with a bit of barbecue chicken fresh off the charcoal grill. But how we used to do it down home, instead of us putting on a grill, we used to put it in the ground. We used to dig a pit in the ground, put some wood, and we used to do it the old-fashioned good way. Because trust me, when you eat it that way, you're eating bone, marrow, and everything in between. So that's how we're going to serve it up today.
Down to the gristle.
Down to the gristle. You think our teeth stay strong, all right
Okay,
now.
down to the gristle.
Okay. So as we get into our conversation, so first, tell us a little bit about you, Tasha.
About me, actually, I live in Atlanta, the Atlanta area, I'll say.
Hey.
Yes, I do. I was not born here, but I was raised here. So I grew up here and in California. My father lived in California. So I went to school at the Florida A&M University,
Okay.
graduate of FAMU.
Yeah.
Yes. I got my
FAMU.
doctorate from a school called Fielding Graduate University out in Santa Barbara, California. I've been a teacher for nearly 2 decades now.
Wow.
So I have been able to work with our babies and hear them and listen to them, and really just it's been a blessing. It's been a blessing to be able to work with children and to now see the anxiety they have about what's going on in today's world. I also want to say that I have grandparents who were directly involved with the civil rights movement. My grandfather was at Morehouse College, with Dr. King. And so he was one who helped start the NAA. He started the NAACP chapter in Albany. So civil rights and just making sure people stand up for what they should have has been put into my system all my life. So writing this book has just been just an homage to everything that I know and I love and everything that I believe in.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. So tell us, in reference to the book, I see that it's some beautiful illustrations. You work with Russell Wayne. What was just the process that you guys came together to do, or did you give ideas? Were ideas thrown at you? How was that process working together to get the illustrations?
The illustrations he took exactly from my writing. So he was able to take my story and feel the words that I was saying. And it's just amazing because I trusted his gift to be able to tell my story. And every picture that I received, I shed a tear because I was like, this is exactly how I wanted this to look. So I can't even explain how wonderful it was to work with someone who was just able to tell my story.
That's amazing.
So you were just telling us about how your experience in writing this book was kind of like paying homage to, you know, your family and the connection that your family specifically has with the civil rights movement. So can you just tell us a little bit more about just what the writing process was like for you? Because as I can imagine, you know, it's a difficult enough conversation to have with a child. So just from your perspective in writing it, like what was writing it like for you? Like do you feel like you know, got everything out there the first time? You wrote a draft, or what was like the rewrite or the editing process like for you?
Writing it, it's funny because I was going through a transition. I was actually finishing my doctorate at the time. So I stopped work to finish. And someone said, you've got to get your book out. And I said, well, I need to wait until I start working again. And the beauty of it is, you know, you have to, they encouraged me to go ahead and finish now because when something's in you, it will just make a way. So I wrote the book. And it came from a place of just, this has to get out here, because I had seen so many fatalities happen over and over again, and kids just have questions that are hard to explain. I wrote this from the perspective of my grandparents grew up in the Deep South. They grew up where they wanted us to have integration and education that was equal and things of that nature. So I wrote it from that perspective, but the book actually has several generations. So it has a grandmother, a mother, and a son. Well, a family, I'm sorry, the father and son are the main characters. But I wrote it from the angle that generation fought hard for our generation and the future generation, the current generation, to have equality and to be able to be mixed racially and things of that nature, yet we're still dealing with the same thing. So the look of the story has changed, but the story is still the same. And so it talks about, grandmother talks about how she was alive during the time of Dr. King, and how he was assassinated from you know, a gun wound. You know, he was shot and killed. And then we talk about, you know, how it happened in the mom's generation with Rodney King, and how the little boy actually finds out about police brutality, which is difficult for him because his father's actually a police officer. So he finds out about the police brutality through other kids talking and through social media, because this is something we can't hide from kids now. They have access to so much. And so his parents have to have this very necessary but hard conversation. And so it was just worded in such a way where I was listening to my students' concerns. I was listening to, you know, the concerns of people of the past and how they wanted us to have it easier and things of that nature. So I was just able to take a lot of experiences and pull them together.
So with the title #Enough, let's dive into that. What made you specifically choose enough, and with the hashtag?
That's exactly where I was about to go.
You know, it's so interesting because I wrote this book with when Philando Castile was shot in the car, gunned down in the car in front of his fiance's daughter. And that 4-year-old baby who was just so strong during such a hard time, that was just enough for me, because it was just the following day, at the convenience store, it was going on, and I had enough. And so I just felt that was the most appropriate title. I mean, we hashtag everything now, but hashtag we've had enough. We've had enough.
Yeah,
That's right.
You know, I really appreciate that. I wanted to ask you that on top of, for you personally, everything that's been going on since George Floyd, dating even back Trayvon Martin, even as Rodney King, how has this like affected you personally and those around you?
It's interesting. It affects me personally because you realize that you still are not really seen. And so you realize you have to be twice as good and you have to be twice as careful. And so it makes me realize that, you know, even though there have been sacrifices made for me and others to have a better life, we still have to be cautious in everything we do. Like I grew up in the Atlanta area, and it's interesting because so many people have moved here and they wonder why we live in certain areas. Well, why would you live in a majority Black area when you have so many areas that are quote unquote nicer? Being down south, we know there's an invisible line. You know, there's certain places we don't want to be after a certain time. And so it's instilled, and we have a lot of pride in our community here. You have a lot of Black owned businesses and things of that nature. And so it's something that we take pride in, but others may frown upon. So it's just something that is in me that just makes me want to continue to be proud of all the sacrifices that others have made, but still know that I have to be careful and mindful of the fact that racism is alive and well.
What do you, you know, I appreciate when talented individuals like yourself do projects like this, because so many people are out there, they go through so much and they just don't know how to either articulate it, or they don't know how to show it throughout this project, between yourself and then also the people that deal with are reading the book. What is the most difficult, what do you think is the most difficult aspect of it? Right? Because I look at some of the stuff and I'm just like, I don't even know where to begin.
The most difficult aspect of it, I think, is I was very intentional of having a Black male child and a Black father be the focal points, the centerpieces of this book. But for them to have dialogue and to have this difficult discussion of, for the father to teach his son that other people hate you because of your complexion, but you can't live in hate as well. And so it's a difficult thing because you want to hate what others have done, but you still have to have a dignity about yourself and a way that you carry yourself so that you can continue to move forward.
So let me ask you, as you say that, can you remember when it was your childhood, when they had this conversation with you and what that was like?
I can. My father was brown skinned. My mother's very fair, fairly complected. And I remember people thought that I was a product of a mixed, biracial, mixed marriage. Oftentimes when seeing my mother from a distance. But I remember my mother and I driving in from South Georgia, from my grandparents' house back to Atlanta one night, and she was in her work car. And so they thought that this was a Caucasian woman with a Black child in the car. And a man actually tried to run us off the road. And so my mother then had to have a very tough conversation with me.
Huh. I mean, I'm at a loss of words right now. I mean, just
Same. Yeah.
I mean, I you know, like we talk about this all the time. Like our level of melanation or our Blackness is different for everybody. Everybody's experience is different, and it's just interesting. This is another reason why Highly Melanated is created, to show different lifestyles, to show different views of Blackness from other people's eyes.
Right.
And I believe that right there, I don't know how. I probably would be traumatized.
Yeah.
During that, if I was in those shoes. So I commend your mom for actually having that conversation at that time when it was needed.
Yeah. I was a little girl, probably about 6 or 7.
Oh.
So she had to explain to me because I didn't understand. I didn't know what a nigger was. Someone was, pointing like, what are you doing with that nigger child, And so my mother had to just really, and include my grandparents in the conversation, my dad in the conversation, just to explain this to me. and I grew up in mixed environments, you know. So it's a difficult conversation for you to have with your child, and for them to not hate other people of other races for the things that have been done to them by people of other races.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very gentle. You have to have a strategy and an approach in terms of how you want to have what you want the expected outcome to be for the conversation, and just be ready to have open dialogue.
Exactly. That actually makes me really curious as to like what type of feedback you've gotten from parents who have read this book to their children, or just in general, people who have read the book and have had to have these conversations. Like what kind of feedback have you gotten?
It's a beautiful thing, because I do deal with the fact that this child, the main character Christopher, had his best friend. One is Caucasian, one is not Asian. I'm sorry, Hispanic, and so he's asking questions like, well, why doesn't this happen to Kevin? You know, why don't things like this happen? So I wrote it in a way where it can be informative for people of other races, but yet they can feel what this child is experiencing, the hurt and the anguish that he's feeling, and the humiliation he's feeling. So I was just very I've gotten really good feedback from people of other races. I've gotten good feedback from people. I've really gotten good feedback overall. I really have. So I was very surprised by just the encouragement that I've received, the support, people who've been buying the book, and I'm just really grateful.
Was there anything that anybody said that was unexpected? I mean, and not in like a negative way, but like something, because I always feel like it's interesting when we put information out there for people to utilize, and we have our, you know, primary goal of like what we want them to get out of it and what we want them to take away with. And I'm always interested to see if anybody comes back with something different or something that I didn't expect. Like, oh, I'm so glad that, you know, that you took X, Y, and Z away from this. I didn't really think about it like that, but you're right. This is this, that, or the third. So was there any kind of feedback that you got that was like informative or just an unexpected?
I did get one unexpected. I actually had a person ask me, why did I write about this subject, this topic? And I was like, it's necessary, it's needed. And it's a part of my daily life. You know, I may not carry it on my shoulder, but this is what I always have to know in the back of my mind in every situation, that I am a Black woman. And so, you know, that is, it shows up. Fortunately, being in Atlanta poured into me, so that, you know, in such a way to have so many positive Black leaders here. But I felt a sense of pride and confidence in being Black. But it's just, yeah, I did have a person ask me, why did I write it? And almost as if they were offended that I would write about something such as police brutality. So, yeah, that was one. And you're right. People do have different point of views. They do see things and take something differently. And you're excited that they got that message. But I'm like, I wrote it in this way. So yes, I have had people that just actually want to talk to me more and more about the books and different parts, and what was I going through? What was I thinking? What was I experiencing? So, yeah.
I want to. Does anybody have a question?
No, go ahead.
I want to ask you, when you were finished writing this book, hashtag enough, everybody, available on Amazon,
Barnes and Noble.
Okay, available on Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, wherever you can, Kindle, wherever you can get your information. When you completed this book, what did it do for you? What did it like instill in you going on so further in the future?
You just made me emotional. One thing is that I was very close to my grandparents. And so I do want to, their works are not in vain. I mean, my mom grew up in the Jim Crow South. You know, my grandfather was very involved, like I said, in civil rights, and they grew up to crosses burning on their yard, things of that nature. My grandfather ran for a political position and actually won, but they told him they couldn't give it to him because he was Black. And so just, you know, their last name is in this book. The lasting impression that they have poured into me will always remain in me. The sacrifices they made for all of us. I mean, like, I'm a third generation HBCU graduate. They made sure that, you know, we knew to love ourselves. And when you love yourself, you can love others. And so I really wanted to get this done. My father passed in August of last year. So I prayed that I could get this done before he passed. And it was just interesting because he called me and he had read it and he said, I see this book. And he said, I see your name on it, but what exactly did you do? I said, I wrote it. And my dad is he was such a scholar. And so he said, well, goodness, we spent all this money for you to do this. You should have been writing all along. So it was such a beautiful moment to not just want to do something, but to accomplish it and to do it to the best of your ability and to really pour in this book the values that have been placed in me in terms of loving yourself, loving others, and standing up for what is right. And standing up for what is right, there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. And when you love yourself, you know that you deserve whatever God created for you to have. You know, he wants us to have abundance, all of us, not just a select few. And so I was just able to finish this, and I felt a sense of pride that I hadn't felt. You know, fortunately, I've been in places where I've been able to, you know, accomplish many things, but this was one that felt quite different, and it just feels good.
Wow, I felt that. Like, I felt that to the core of my soul, what you just said. And as you were saying that, and it may be slightly off topic, but I am so curious to know, I'm sure other people are, because you come from such a great legacy. Can you just remember some, or share with us a piece of words of wisdom that your grandmother and grandfather left with you, that they instilled with you, that you can pass on to us?
My grandfather would always say, you are better than no one, but no one is better than you.
Come on.
Ooh.
Come on.
Wow.
Jazz session.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
It's just, I just wanted to go back to you talking about like you being able to finish this book and get it out there before your father passed away. And I'm so sorry to hear that. Rest in peace, rest in heaven to your father. I was touched by that too, because Ushi and I we are both self-proclaimed daddy's girls, and we, you know, will scream that from the mountaintop. So I can only imagine what that was like for you to kind of like hear those accolades like from your dad about a topic that is just so needed. The discussion is so needed because it just hits different. Like I felt that, like I really felt that. So
yeah,
I'm
too.
just, I know how you felt when PJ asked you about like, you know, like, what was finishing this book able to accomplish for you? And so with that, just, well, I'll save this question for a little later. I have a question for you, but I'll put it on pause because it's related, but it's better served towards the end of the conversation.
So how about this? On the same wave of where you were just going, to piggyback off the previous question, I had inquired about what's some words of wisdom that your father left with you before he transitioned.
Oh gosh, it's just amazing. I can't give you one specific thing because it was my dad was a person of words, and so he continuously poured into me, but it was just a feeling. So last summer when I went out to California to visit him, and we went to celebrate my birthday, and he just was so proud to say that I'm his child. So, you know, he just said he's amazed and he's in awe of me. And he was like, you're gonna, you know, he's like, this book is just gonna be so famous. Like, he just spoke into me, and I believed him. So I still just have conversations from heaven now. And so yeah, he just, it was a feeling that was much needed, because as much as I love my father, there were challenges there too, you know. So
I
it
understand.
was
Well,
just
that's how family works.
Parenting 101.
Look, I love like same thing. I love my
Yeah.
father with all my heart and soul,
Yes.
but you know, it took
Yes.
time without
Like,
his
slow down.
challenges.
Yes.
It's gonna go over here for a second.
Yes.
You know, we just might need to take a little time out and just work
Yes.
through some stuff.
Exactly. Exactly. He was just, he came from he and my mom came from different sides of the tracks, if you may have it. And he has a lot of family from New York, and he was the first in his family to go to college. So he's a graduate of Morehouse, and he just was very hard on me academically, because it's just like, hey, I want you to be the best. But at some point he learned, I just want you to have peace and to be happy and to do whatever God calls you to do, and to be, you know, free to do that. So it was just such an evolution. There was we had the height in both areas last summer. So he made me more frustrated than I've ever been. But then he gave me such a strong sense of peace that I can't even define in words, and such a pride. And so just proud of me for not being afraid, because when you write a book, you feel a little vulnerable. You put yourself out there, you know. You're not worried. You're not worried, but you're just wondering, is it going to be received? Is it going to be criticized? Either way, you've got to be prepared and to know that this is what was put in me, and I'm going to put it out there. And so you've got to surrender to fear and just do what your heart says do. And so he was just proud of me, because a lot of people say, hey, I'm going to do this, and they don't get to it. So he's just like, wow, you really, because I did it quietly. I didn't tell he nor my mom that I was doing this. I just showed them the finished product.
So, you know, you mentioned a lot of different things. In particular, I'm glad that you mentioned like this level of vulnerability, right? I always give like very loaded questions, because I want to have people think. So with that being said, one, would you be opposed to actually reading an excerpt from your book? And then two, what are some of the things that have changed, or like what are some of the things that have remained the same? I feel like a lot of times, you know, people have not. I think a lot of things have remained the same. Like, what similarities or what gaps are you think that that we're still struggling through? So, would you be opposed to reading something
Not
from
at
your book?
all. Not at all. Here's the cover.
Come
Hashtag
on.
enough. And those you don't, this is Atlanta in the background. So this is Atlanta.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it just took so much to get so many of these details done. Let me see. I can start with the beginning, and it says, it was an ordinary sunny Tuesday afternoon. My friends Kevin, Miguel, and I were outside playing basketball. We were engaged in our usual debate over who we thought should be the MVP, as we passionately compared Steph Curry, Dwayne Wade, and LeBron James. So at this point, these are just kids, and they're just coming together for what they see as common. And so I'm going to go to another part where, let me see. This is a part that kind of gets to me and to many. The little boy sees something on TV, so you can see that he's looking at the news, and he sees something. So he tells his mom that he saw some things, and his mom just kind of tried to ignore the conversation because she didn't know how to have this conversation, or if she should have it without his father. And so he said, Mom, He went upstairs and strolled through the internet. And he said he paused. I saw a video of a man who was severely bleeding in a car. An officer was yelling at him and opened fire. I screamed, I can't take this anymore. I could not stop crying. Mom ran into the room and asked what happened. I showed her the video. She stood there in disbelief. She didn't even know how to console me as I wept. I asked, why are things like this happening? Why doesn't this seem to happen to more people that look like Kevin? Mom, will this happen to me? Mom appeared to be weary and perplexed. She said, we're going to church tonight and we can talk to the pastor. I said, church? Are you serious? Don't you get it? God does not care about people that look like you and me. If he did, this wouldn't keep happening. I definitely don't want to go to church.
Wow.
So I mean, in that you're already seeing very early issues of trauma, that become very systemic later on in life, and like this is something that we go scream to the mountaintops about, like how it has affected us in long term. What do you feel is like the major gaps? Like, why can't both sides see eye to eye? Like, what do you think that is still missing? Because I mean, we're still putting out, you wrote a book, we're getting on a podcast, we're talk to me.
I think one thing that's still missing is dialogue. I think sometimes we're taught to be polite, to not say certain things. And I think that we don't have created space to have these necessary and brave conversations. I think by the time we have them, there's been so much frustration, things that we've held on to, that we become explosive in our words and our ways. And so I think that it's a time to plant a seed, and to let our youth know that nobody's better than them, but they're not better than anybody. And just to have a space, a safe space where you have these conversations. In the schools, we don't really teach it because that's for the parents, but then the parents don't really teach it because if your child is privileged or white or whatever may be, you don't have to have this conversation. For our kids, we do have a lot of kids that are privileged, but they may not experience this if they go to a school where everybody looks like them. And then it may happen, when they hit college, or, when they go into an unfamiliar place where they aren't protected, so to speak. And so I think what's missing from this is just the opportunity to have this genuine dialogue and to not filter things, to not be afraid to say what you really feel. Maybe, crossing over and having children talk to other schools of kids who, just to open this dialogue and not be offended by what they say, because it may be their lack of their ignorance, basically. But I think that's one main thing that's missing, is the chance to have this dialogue or this taught in the schools.
I agree with you. I think that is a big issue. And I think the main reason why this dialogue is missing is because the conversation is uncomfortable. It's not, a happy conversation that people are, so energetic and enthused to be a part of. And so what happens as a result of that is I don't want to expose my child to, anything that's uncomfortable or anything, that make them upset, or, and so with that kind of mentality, people think that they're protecting their children. And when I say that, I mean the people who don't have to have, the conversation with their children about how they're portrayed or how they're received by the police. So people who are not, I'm talking about the people who aren't marginalized, who aren't targeted. They feel like they don't want to have these conversations with their children because it is an uncomfortable conversation, and they don't want to necessarily expose their children to, that potential of just those negative feelings. But that's what needs to happen in order for everybody to be aware, in order for everybody to be on the same page, and for everybody to actively work to change it.
Correct. Yeah. This is what I was very intentional about, is that this young man is growing up in an area where it was a dream for, a previous generation, for their child to have the luxury to be in a, multiracial environment. And, the parents hid these complex issues from their child, because I don't know if they were in denial or if they just didn't feel like they had to address it right away, but it was presented to them instead of them saying, let's have the talk. So, because he started to see things. And so, it is, our children do need to have a chance and a safe place to have these discussions.
Right before we started recording, I happened to just scroll through some television, and I was watching Oprah's latest series. Where do we go from here?
From here,
and I just started it. So right before we started, it was to the man who was telling the young man, like, I'm 31. My father is 62. He was frustrated. I'm frustrated. You're 16. You're frustrated. Yes. It is up to you and your generation to continue this fight. I don't know how many of us, because, a lot of us been marching. We've been protesting. We've been saying this from the door ever since existence of, of us being free. But for the next generation coming up, I want to know, from your perspective, what do you think would be the most important thing that they need to do? Period. Like the most important thing, the first thing they need to do.
To understand the importance of humanity. And I say that because in this book, I talk about Dr. King and him, being a father and being a husband and a sibling and things of that nature. And a lot of times children now, with these games that they have and things, they can shoot somebody and not realize, kind of detach themselves from the human element. And so I say that because it's important for us, all of us, to know that we're humans and we mean something to someone. And, we don't want to get so involved and enraged in other things that we forget that people are human.
I love that, because I think that's lost along the way. And I think the also added part to that is, I'll give an example. I had a young gentleman staying with me for some time, and he was pretty much a lot younger than me, like in his mid-20s. We have a difference of opinions when it comes to. I was showing him something from was Dick Gregory. He was being interviewed on the Breakfast Club.
Wow.
And this person, shall not name any names, was such a woke individual. When he looked at that and he listened to him, he was saying, "Well, that's just some old ass black man." And I was like, "Wow, great. Let's just take some time to actually pay attention and listen to what he's saying." And then this person's comment was, what's going on back then is not the same as it's going on back before. We have different views, different things are going on now. And it's just, I think that the next generation also has to understand that the next generation, as well as the one after, is that nothing is new under the sun. We've been going through this from the beginning.
Same script, different day.
Exactly.
And I think that once they get out of the mindset of, entitlement, then how about we get into the mindset of, how can we fix this? What are we going to do to fix it?
And understand that rage is not going to fix it.
I mean,
I think the parents. I think the parents have to also change the narrative and begin to teach their children differently and expose them at younger ages to different things so that they can come to a full understanding when they become older. Because, like, my dad, for example, is an older man. My dad was a part of the first all black and the first, the last, and the only all black Ranger element that went into war. And because I was in his household, he taught me certain things when I was very, very young age. you know. So but when I became a woman, the lessons, they were there, they were instilled in me, just like you, Tasha, coming from such a strong lineage. These lessons and things were instilled in you. So us as the parents, we have to be the ones to teach the next generation so that they can grow up to be able to make changes and to stand up and fight the fight and be on the front line and not take the back burner and not think, you know, is this going to go away, or, oh, that's not my problem, because it's all of our problem, whether you're from America and you're Black or you're from somewhere else. Once you are a melanated person in America, you are a target. It affects you regardless.
Yeah.
You know,
It's a
so I
different
definitely
game.
think, and I definitely think it's the parents that have to teach the young ones, get them off, like you said, the video games that desensitize them. What's it, Grand Theft Auto? What's the other shooting one, the military one?
Call of Duty.
Call of
Exactly.
Duty.
Exactly. And these games have these young men thinking that, oh, I can do that. I can put this gun together and do all this. And it's like, no, buddy.
Yeah.
That's not real life.
Yeah.
You know what? One thing that's very interesting to me, though, there's something that I constantly go back to, and a lot of people, I often get shut down for this because the focus is taken off of us again. But I'll say it again. I think it's very interesting, like a lot how you just mentioned, Ushi. We're teaching our young men and women that we have to kind of continue on with the fight, and we have to do what we need to do. But it's always been, for the most part, how we continue on the fight on our side, and a war is always on two fronts.
Yeah.
So my question is always, how are we opening up the dialogue to the other side so that they can also learn? I had a link that was sent to me by one of my best friends today, and it was screenshots for a group called Discussions of Racism Amongst White Women. And immediately everybody got up into arms and was just very much so like, that sounds stupid. Oh, like what could they possibly be talking about? And what's interesting about it is that, which no one like really dived into, was that there were Black moderators in there, Black women moderators. So while they're having this discussion, they had a space where they were able to safely speak about how they feel about racism and be able to actively address it. Now, we as people, often we go, oh, we don't want that because we're afraid of like this racial infestation to just be there. So immediately we want to disperse it. But maybe that, those conversations need to be had so you can dispel rumors, you can debunk issues. So, what does everybody feel about that? Because I'm for it. I would love to have conversations to figure out, like, why do you hate me? Why do you want me to be killed?
I think the idea, and I'm sorry if I'm jumping ahead of anybody, but this, as I said before, we've been fighting this fight for the longest. We've been doing this. We Black people, or people of color, have been fighting towards this. It is no longer up to us, because now we're at that rage point, as you said, Tasha. That's not the answer, but we can't keep doing this, or else we'll just end ourselves in a grave much sooner than we need to be.
Yeah.
It's up to, this conversation has to, and I applaud you, because again, this is one of the great things about writing your book. This opens up dialogue. This creates conversations. More of this does happen now that white people are seeing what's going on, and oh my God, that's so not right, but have been turning their back to it. I saw this photo, and I think, I'm not sure, I didn't post it, but it was of the man who was kneeling on George Floyd's neck. And instead of George Floyd, it was a dog. And it was showing how if you are more triggered by this than another man putting his knee on any man, regardless of whether his race or ethnic background is, then you are part of the problem. So you have to actually start looking within yourselves, and these conversations have to happen within your inner circles. Completely.
Yeah. I will say that I think that it also needs to be implemented that we need to be more proactive in terms of the curriculums taught in the schools and what goes into our curriculums for all of our kids, not just charter, not just private, but as us being tax-paying citizens, we pour into the public school sector. So we need to be more involved in the curriculum and that and just have kids to have these conversations, because there's been a challenge going around where you've seen Caucasian kids who have their knees on another child's neck and they think it's funny. You know, they're laughing in the pictures. And then
Black kids joining in with them.
Oh God.
Yeah. Oh, you have. Oh, it's terrible. The black kid would be the one on the ground, and the white kid would be the one on his neck, and they're both laughing.
And I don't want to cut you off even further, Tasha. But here's the other thing that adds to that. Now, this, you know, as generations have changed, and as like people have become more politically correct or whatever have you, now this whole idea of I don't see color, which also is just a racist statement in altogether, because that means you don't see me as, you don't see my blackness, you don't see my.
I voted for Obama.
Yeah, you know,
I have black friends.
Okay, so
the list goes on.
So all of that to me is like it bleeds into the communities that these you know, these multiracial communities are, you know, being fed into, and as a black child trying to fit in a white man's world. Sometimes you're just going to do what you need to do if you don't have that strong support system, that strong parent, that strong, you know, big brother, big sister, whoever in your life to let you know, like, hey, don't do that. Don't say that. You know, so
because at one point we were people that we as a community, we raised a child, as a village, we had raised a child. So I know when I was little, if I was out cutting up, and Tasha, I'm sure you can attest to this. If I was out cutting up and somebody saw me that knew my grandma, they would be like, I'm going to tell your grandma, give me a couple licks, pop, pop, pop. Then I'm on my way back. Oh, I heard you was cutting up. On the way, I'm getting beat all the way back home till my grandma beat me again.
For the simple fact that you said cutting up just lets us all know that you were raised by a black person.
You weren't acting out. No. You weren't having a tantrum. So I think one of the things that is kind of central, like in this conversation, is just what we've all been saying, is there's kind of like two sides to this dialogue. You know, this conversation is something that us in the Black community, we've been having with our children for generations. Like, this is not a new conversation. We've been doing this again and again and again. But what I'm curious to know is, like, what does that look like on the other side? You know, like, we have like our speculations and we have like what we can infer from like the situation, but I really would just like you being the author, like, of this book, somebody who is not a person of color gets this book, reads it to their child. What would you encourage them to say to their child after they're done reading this book? Like, what would you encourage their conversation to look like, or their dialogue with their child to look like?
That's a good question.
To be a change agent, that you want to be a person who doesn't repeat the past, but you help to create a brighter future. And so, you know, you may experience opposition from other people for wanting to stand up for something that they may not stand up to or believe in, but you just never know who's watching you. So don't be afraid. You may encourage and inspire others to do what is fundamentally right, you know, and that to have empathy, and not sympathy, but empathy, and to understand and you know, encourage them to have conversations with other people that are not in their typical circles. And so I just say that, you know, encourage your child to be a change agent, encourage them to have empathy, learn more, read more, ask more questions, and you know, just don't be afraid to do the right thing.
And honestly, like, I've been saying that for like the last couple of weeks, that I truly feel like this time and this moment, like this movement, just feels different.
It does.
And I do feel that that is the primary reason why.
Yes.
Is because there are so many allies, and I'll use that term because that's the only one I can think of right now, but there are so many allies in this current movement that are doing exactly what you said, that are being change agents who aren't afraid, or maybe they are afraid. I'll take that back. They probably are afraid of the backlash they're going to get, of the scrutiny that they're going to get, of the violence that might come their way, but they're speaking out in spite of that, and they're doing what they know to be right, and it's happening in abundance. I do feel like that, to me specifically, that's why I feel like this time and this movement and this moment, it just feels different than it has in the past.
It does. I believe that this is a year of revelation. Like, so many things are being revealed in this year. This is, oh my gosh. You know, it's come in with a bang. I mean, it came in with a bang, but it is, if you look for the good in it, the good is that things that we've been talking about, things that we've been discussing, things that we've been demanding are being revealed. You know, a lot of evil is coming, coming for a lot of things are just, it's just, and people, it's like their eyes are open now and their ears. I mean, when you have to sit and be still, the whole world has to sit and be still with COVID-19. And so you get a different perspective of things. You learn to appreciate different things, and then you look at simultaneously in 50 states, this has never happened, where you've had people marching in 50 states at one time and worldwide. So you got Denmark, you have all Germany. I mean, you have
Paris,
people from all
Italy.
over. And so it's a beautiful thing, and it does feel it does feel different.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
It's actually interesting because it's 60 years since the 60s, and in the 60s, when it was televised, was when things began to change because they saw it on TV. So it's interesting that you said that it took COVID for everybody to have to be home to be able to see this and see it up front, where we've always seen. And the same thing happened in the 60s when they saw us being hosed on TV. It changed. That's when we got our Civil Rights Acts passed, and things changed. And it's just interesting that it's 60 years since the 60s.
It is interesting.
And that's that's the point I was actually going to make, because I'm not sure how many people actually tuned in to George Floyd's ceremony. Rest in peace, brother. The part that stuck out to me the most was when Reverend Al Sharpton was speaking, and he said, everything happens, pretty much, this is paraphrasing, but everything happens for a reason in the time that it's supposed to happen. There are no distractions during this time. We're all stuck at home, or it should be, unless you're an essential employee, then you need to be going to work or going out. Where there's no sports on TV. There's nothing, there's no music concerts. There's nothing, there's no hanging out with your friends. So we're stuck right now watching all of this over and over and over again. And that is why for myself personally, I said, this feels so different to me. And like, it's still affecting me. I cry just about every day. Now it's just about, and only because I'm starting to see, more and more people actually speaking up and doing things, and like walking past. I was walking my dogs the other day, and, the neighborhood I live in is a pretty decent neighborhood. Further up is pretty much where the white folks live. In the Jewish Hasidic community, and I overheard a conversation that I probably would have never heard to Hasidic Jewish men say in general, which was, I never knew that it was so bad for Black people. I never knew that they had so much to go through. We always thought that we as a Jewish community has it bad, or had it worse, but it's now like opening people's eyes and starting to see that, the humanity, as you said before, the humanity has to come back. Humanity has to come, to the forefront before the aliens come, because, the UFOs have been sighted. So,
Okay, look, they're already here. They've been here. Okay. They've been here.
I'm glad that you brought up the whole perspective thing again, because it really, that's always my gripping point, because honestly, when it comes to just like I guess just trying to understand people's point of view, you have the people who don't understand it at all, and then you have the people that are just completely oblivious. They
Yeah.
just have no idea
That's
because they don't
privilege.
live that.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, I mean, even if you want to call it privilege, there's
Blind.
just some people they're just not taught that. White people are typically not teaching their children, hey, be careful of like making sure that you're wearing the right thing at the right time with the right people. Like no
Yeah.
one had, like a lot like you, Tasha. I remember the conversation that I had with my father long ago, and my mother and other family members about being a young black man, and to kind of just watch out, which on so many different levels is not only detrimental, but it's also it's hindering to you, right? Because you feel like you can't do certain things, you can't be empowered to learn and grow and be more, and that's always a big argument with like people, non-people of color, who they're able to do anything. So is their success somehow loosely tied into that? Because what, either way, no matter what I do, I'm gonna get out. Either way, no matter what I'm going to, still be successful. It's a very deep psychological generational divide. And I'm just glad that you brought that up again, PJ, because like it's deep. It's deep.
Well, and I want to actually do this before we move any further. I'm curious, just so we can actually like say it out loud as well. Do we remember the first time that we've heard this conversation from our parents? Like, so Tasha said it. I know Ushi, you have, because you know who your father is. Chris, you just Reg, you just said it.
Yeah,
Blair,
I was like maybe like I was probably like 6 or 7. I was like 6 or 7. I remember it.
I was 30, and I remember because we got pulled over by a cop. And I would never forget that. That's one of my earliest memories, but I specifically remember that like I can't say I remember the conversation word for word, but I remember everything that happened. Almost like it was a dream or something, but I just didn't forget it.
So I'll say for me, I don't know if my parents ever specifically made a demonstration out of it where it was like, sit down, let me talk to you about this thing. I think for me, it was always like an in the moment kind of thing. Like, and I was knowledgeable enough to understand why my parents were telling me what they were telling me without them explaining to me why they were telling me what they were telling me. And just to give an example so that it makes sense is, like when my brothers and my mom and I, we go to a store or something, and my mom would be like, all right, when we get in the store, don't touch anything. Like that conversation my mom had with me. But it was never like a demonstrative, like, don't touch anything because they're going to be watching you because you're black and they're going to think that you're stealing. It never went that far because I think it was just kind of understood, or I don't know. I immediately understood the reason why my mother was telling me when we get in the store, don't touch anything, was because of what would all those things that she would have said next, like the explanation behind it. So it was always a conversation of like, do this, don't do this, do that, don't do that, without the further explanation of because you're black.
It's funny. It's interesting with that because I remember this happening 3 times. Remember now being born here in Brooklyn, living in Brownsville, living in Flatbush, living in like predominantly black spaces. The only time that we were ever really told to, about the black and white situation is probably when we went to my parents' job. So we knew how to interact with white people because we really weren't really interacting with white people when I was growing up. I wasn't. So, my mother's law firm had, Christmas every year and like different events or the circus and blah. So you knew how to act in front of white people, number one. So that was the first time. And I was roughly around, let's say around 6 or 7, around when my brother was born. Again, later down the road, when my youngest brother was born, and he is the lighter of us. And so it was a different conversation at this moment. But my father had it with all 3 of us, even though he was a baby. He really didn't understand what was going on, but he was sitting there like he sat him down like he was talking to him, like
young.
like exactly. And he was trying to let him know that just because you're light skinned, you are still black. Just because you're fairer than him, or because your hair is red, or whatever your situation is, you are still viewed as a black man. It didn't really wait just one second. It really didn't dawn on me again, and because being from here in Brooklyn, like I said, I've never really had to deal with white people like that, except for teachers, pretty much. When we moved from Brooklyn to Jersey, to Union, New Jersey, and I've said this before, Union, New Jersey, and Union County and Union High School were the last county and the last high school in the state of New Jersey to integrate their high schools. And it was very racist, like blatant, but just not like written for white and for colored. I remember that day, and I think we had this conversation on our first episode, the day that I was walking down the street and a cop stopped me, and it was like 10 o'clock at night, and they asked me, where are you going? What are you doing? What are you doing here? And I, after everything was said and done, I had this conversation with my father. He was like, look, we are the minority here. We were the first black family within a 5-block radius. And I've never had that culture shock before in my entire life. And that was the first time I've ever been called a nigger. So we had that conversation, and I'm now 15 or so. Pause for a second. Charlie?
They chiming in. They say, yeah, tell
Is he like, I'm black too?
It is,
Okay.
and Charlie is the brown dog. But it's the fireworks. So, he had that conversation with me, and I really had to understand it now, being in such a white space, how to protect myself as a black man, like regardless of whatever my record may be or may not be. Just the idea of now having to like look over my shoulder every other minute.
Scary.
It's worrisome. So I'm glad I wanted to get that out especially when we brought that up the first time.
But that's exactly the thing. Like, we all have had some version of this conversation, because it's just it comes with the territory. It comes with the skin.
Yeah.
But I'm only saying this because I think one of the systemic problems that we have amongst ourselves and our non colored our non people of colored counterparts is that everything's always seems to be dwarfed, right? Because even with this, okay, so you and Phil and Chris and Ushi and Blair and Tasha have all had this conversation about like how to, I guess, present yourself in public. But then it doesn't end there. It's a ongoing, systemic, nonstop, reaffirming issue that you just see day in and day out. I remember when me and my family, especially when we were younger, we used to frequent the Poconos a lot to just try and get away. Now, by this time, I already had the conversation with, my mom and my dad and other family members about being, a particular skin tone and being looked at differently just because of that. But when I kid you not, we were going up to the Poconos. We decided that we were going to go out and we were going to get some like groceries and shop and, stuff so that we can sustain ourselves for our weekend getaway. In the middle of the intersection was a whole ass Ku Klux member in a whole Ku Klux Klan gown.
Wow.
Sitting there as if he was Santa Claus with the bell and all, trying to raise donation and money. And
Donations to the Klan.
And imagine you seeing that as a young child, I don't even remember exactly how old I was. I don't think that I was that much old. I think my sister, I kind of base everything on my sister because she was relatively young. She might have been like 3 or 4, whatever the case may be. So I must have been like, 10, 11. And you're just seeing this whole thing, something that your parents had talked about, and like people that hate you. My dad purposely rolled down the window and said, "Do you need some change? I have some change." And he said, "Fuck you, nigga."
Mm.
Kept it moving. And I just remember, we drove off, and I just remember just like, this shit is real. Like it's only by just off the strength that I was able to see it firsthand. But like how many reaffirming actions and situations and issues have we gone through and been just traumatized by this, throughout our lives? Because that's just one of out of all the nonsense that I've dealt with.
You say that, and as you were telling that story, the thing that came to my mind was, okay, now in that situation, like, you have a choice. Like, what do you do? Do you confront it and say something about it? Or do you think about the repercussions of if you were to confront it? Because that's exactly where my mind went. I was like, okay, he can say something to him and he can confront him on it, and it can go one way. But say it went another way. Say your dad confronted him on it. The man, looked at your license plate as you drove away, figured out where you guys were staying, got the clan together, and came and paid you guys a visit that night.
I'm telling you.
Like, what do we do in those situations? Like, and I feel like that's why for so long the fight has been what the fight has been, and why it's been so difficult for us, because we teeter that line between speaking out against injustice and fearing for our safety.
It's so funny you say that. I just like, I'm sorry to keep cutting or adding more to it, but like as you were saying how that thought pops in your head, the thing that popped in my head that I could remember very vividly, I was in Indiana. Why Indiana? For the Tasha?
Yes. I'm sorry. My earplugs are coming off.
You good, sis.
No, it's okay. It's okay.
Difficulties.
You good, sis.
I was in Indiana for the National Baptist Convention, right? And I distinctively remember, again, I'm young. I'm about 14 now, trying to fit in with the kids that I never really fit in with. We went to McDonald's. In the McDonald's that we were in this like hick town in Indiana, they wouldn't serve one of the girls there, and because she was really dark skinned, and they said out loud that you're not welcome here, right? Trying to fit in, everybody started doing whatever they had to do or saying whatever they say. I vaguely remember all of that. I remember my retaliation in the whole situation when they were throwing food at the McDonald's itself. Like, that was the way we were going to get back. I threw my orange soda, black people. I threw my orange soda into the street. I thought I was going to hit the McDonald's, but I wasn't that good of a throw yet. And instead, it hit a white pickup truck. Now we're in Indiana at this hotel, and the white pickup truck stopped, did a whole crazy ass U-turn, and then started running towards us. We managed to split up, some went into the back of the hotel, some went through the front of the hotel. I remember distinctively when the man who had a Confederate flag sticker on the top of his car, on the back of his car, and all of his windows, when he pulled up inside the hotel, he turned out to be one of the pastors that were preaching at the convention. And that right there, when I told my mother that, and I told my father that, they had the conversation again. Like, you don't know who these people are during this time. Now we're like getting a little bit more benefit because now the hatred is just like outward and open, and we can see it firsthand and we can taste it as soon as we know it. Before, we always had to think about it. I just still remember the fear of, even though I was retaliating to try to fit in, the fear of what would have happened if that white pickup truck came around, had a shotgun, and just killed a bunch of niggas. You know what I mean? Because that's the first thought that ran through all of our minds when we split up. And I hope that we get to a point where there's no more of this.
He's agreeing.
They agree. They agree. They agree.
Yeah.
And you know, Tasha, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like exactly what we're doing here is one of the reasons why, you know, like you wrote your book, is to get this kind of dialogue that people can start having these kind of like conversations, or for those of us who are already having these conversations, to continue them and get them to evolve and grow, and to involve more people in the conversation and more people in the dialogue. So what's next for you? Like, do you have plans to write another book, or just what's it about? Tell us about it.
It's I'm writing, I want to do a series on abuse of power, basically bullying. And so I did my dissertation on bullying. And so this book is bullying, but it's an abuse of power type bullying. You know, there's another one where they're going to meet another child who has a different religious belief, dresses differently, and he's being teased. And so the parents have to have that dialogue in terms of, you know, how to treat other people. You know, you don't have to believe the same, but, you know, he's a child of color like you type book. So
again,
I like
a conversation
that.
that needs to be had. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, with that being said, you know, I that's a lot to digest. We ate a lot, but we always save room for dessert.
Oh,
We always save room for desserts. So, in case you could not tell, we are a bunch of foodies, and my favorite thing is dessert. So, with dessert, we would just like for you to share with us your dessert of choice, and then also just what your final thought is, just what you would like to leave with the listening and viewing audience. Like, what's the main takeaway that you want them to have from anything that you've said today?
Okay, my dessert of choice today will be key lime pie.
Amen.
And or key lime cake. It's hard to pick between those two. But
it's your world.
Okay, well, I have both.
Key lime cake?
Look,
yeah, key lime cake.
What we'll do is we'll have both, and I will come over and help you eat it.
Yes. The sweet thing that I want to say is that things are going to get better, because we're going to be the change that we want to see.
Okay.
That's the sweet thing.
I love it.
That's so simple, but so sweet. Okay.
Straight, simple, to the point.
All right, guys. Thank you again, guys, for those of you who have stuck through it from the beginning to end right now. This is officially our first live stream broadcast. Welcome for those of you who are on YouTube, those of you who are on Facebook, and whatever platforms that this actually will reach. We'll work on this later. As always, guys, you can follow us on all forms of social media. Instagram, that is Highly Melanated Podcast. Twitter is H_Melanated Pod. You can email us any questions, comments, and concerns, thoughts, you know, that you have about this episode, any other episode going that you've heard in the past. You can email that to highlymelanatedpodcast@gmail.com. Again, you can go to our websites. Pretty soon there will be some merch that will be coming soon. All of this is actually in the streamline for later, along with the Google number. That the Google number or the 800 number, still working on those details for you guys to call in and give your voices and let yourself be heard. And again, we Highly Melanated folks would love to thank Dr. Tasha Ellis.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for what you for what you've done. Thank you for creating that platform. And number one, it's the same thing that I've been having this conversation all the time. If there is a lane that needs to be created that hasn't been done yet, it's time for you to create it.
And I
Yes.
skirt on up in there.
You know, and just go ahead and take that parking spot from Karen.
Yes.
So, yeah. So, on that note, I think we're done. I think we're
Yeah. This was great, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank
No,
you.
thank
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And
Love,
please
peace,
make
Oh, yeah,
sure
also-
to let us know when your next book is out,
I
so that
certainly
way
will.
we can have you back to talk about that.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
on top of that, because we didn't do that, my fault. Where can everybody find you and all of your stuff?
My book is available on Amazon. There's also Barnes and Noble, and it is on Kindle. So
Okay, come on. You got
yes.
options, y'all.
Yes.
Options.
Hashtag enough, Dr. Tasha Ellis, EDD.
Okay. You want to provide your Instagram or your, do you have a website or
I
anything?
do have
Anything
an
in the works?
Instagram. My Instagram is at DRTASHA. That is my Instagram. Is that right?
Dr. Tasha?
Yeah, I think that's it. Let me see.
It's Dr. Tasha Ellis.
It's Dr. Thank you.
You better know your own Instagram.
Oh my gosh, that is hilarious. Yes. And so that is how I don't have a website yet. I am looking for someone to help me create one. So that is something that I'll work on now that school is officially over. So definitely.
Website coming soon, book coming soon.
Yes.
We ready.
Yeah.
We out here.
Ready.
Some
Stay
blessings.
ready.
Blessings on top of blessings. Yes.
Thank you all. So you all have a wonderful evening. This has just brought my heart so much joy. So continue to be you and strive to be everything that you were created to be.
Amen.
Amen.
Yes.
Thank you.
Come on with the
Shay. All right. So on that note, love, peace, and
be the change.
Educate those children.
Joy.
And enough is enough.
Enough. Hashtag enough.
Enough.
Hashtag
Right.
enough.
Right.
Hashtag enough.
Yes.
All right, guys.
Thank you.
You're
Good
very
night,
welcome.
everyone.
Good night.
Hey.